Dive into Old School's first new skill by discovering the hidden armaments of the Wizard's Tower and gaining valuable insight into the practices of warding.
So, I'm assuming most of you have heard of the new skill Jagex has been working on for Old School RuneScape. However, what most of you may not know is that this is the third skill Jagex has put resources into only to have it fail in the polls. Although warding hasn't failed yet, I won't be surprised if it does. I'll explain that and the history of all the failed skills in this video. So first of all, 99% of what gets implemented into Old School RuneScape is based off of in-game polls. You need a total level of at least 280 to vote in these polls, and the proposed feature will only be considered successful or pass the poll if it gets a 75% yes or more vote. Due to such a high bar, there are many features that obviously don't pass, even if it's by less than 1%. Regardless, every time a new skill is proposed, it is introduced through the polling system. Before we get to warding, let's go back in time and talk about the previous two skills that failed the polls, and maybe figure out why. Back in May of 2014, Jagex held a player-designed skill competition, much like the player-designed content polls that led to the introduction of Rooftop Agility and the Motherlode Mine. The top 5 skills that eventually got pulled were Herding, Geomancy, Forestry, Astronomy, and Artisan. Artisan being the skill that won the poll with 43.5% of the vote. This type of poll doesn't need a 75% yes vote, because that isn't an option for this type of poll. Jagex was just interested in seeing which skill the community liked the most. Moving on, Artisan is more or less like Slayer, but for non-combat skills. Artisan would use runecrafting, construction, herblore, crafting, fletching, smithing, cooking, and farming as tasks. You would go to an artisan master who would tell you to make, let's say, 100 vials. You'd make those vials and get artisan XP equal to the crafting XP you got from creating them. While working on a task, you could receive motes of inspiration, which would be used to create the unique items Artisan would bring in. Rewards like altered tools that you could wield without the typically associated required combat levels, as it would remove its combat stats. For example, level 3 skillers could hold altered dragon pickaxes. Other items were trinkets you could turn into necklaces for various boosts and bonuses and skills. New clothing was skill boosts, and so on. A lot of people felt this skill was too ambitious with its wide variety of items that many believe would be dead content on release, and just overall too complicated. With this in mind, the skill failed the poll with a 56.6% yes vote. Moving on, the second proposed skill was Sailing. Sailing has been a skill that has been teased for years and years in Old School, eventually getting its own version in RS3 in the form of a mini-game of sorts called Player-Owned Ports. The history of Sailing in Old School dates back to April 1st, 2014, when Jagex introduced Sailing as a skill for April Fool's Day. South of Draenor, you would board a boat, see a cutscene, and gain a level. You could go all the way to level 20 before it would reset your level. Although it was an April Fool's event, it caused players to consider once again, what if sailing was actually a skill? Jagex started to think the same thing, and on September 8th posted this developer blog displaying their ideas behind it. Sailing to Old School RuneScape is almost like what Dungeoneering is to RS3, although a little bit different. Sailing combined multiple skills into one. To make cannons for your boat, you'd need the required smithing level, construct your own storage chests, and so on. You would explore the sea the same way you click with your character. Along the way, you'd encounter points of interest like resource pack islands, a grumpy pirate, or lost dungeons. Sailing would also unlock new areas such as Atlantis and Fossil Island. Overall, it seemed like a pretty solid skill. A skill that would bring new content to Old School but keep nostalgic players happy because they were around when sailing was just a rumor. In my opinion, if any new skill were to pass, it would have been this one. However, it lost by just 7% with a 68% yes vote. Finally, we have the Warding skill introduced at this year's RuneFest. Warding will be used to create magic-based items such as armor and weaponry, as well as imbue items that you could previously only imbue using Nightmare Zone points. Warding is to magic as smithing is to melee base gear. My opinion on this skill is still fairly undecided, but a large chunk of the community is for it, and another large chunk is against it. Many are happy it will bring a new long-term skill to the game, while others are concerned that it'll just be another buyable skill, based off of skills that RS3 already has, like Invention and Divination. So, like most of the community is predicting, this skill will be another to add to the list of content that doesn't pass. there's almost no way 75% of the community will rally for this skill. So what do? Is it possible for old school RuneScape to ever get a new skill? My current answer is no for a lot of reasons. First of all, every time a new skill is proposed, development time is used for content that the team knows will probably never be used. This is very counterproductive for Jagex, that's why in over 5 years, only 3 ideas have been proposed. Things like skills will be on the back burner, while content more likely to actually pass will take center stage. Secondly, the community is just too diverse for a new skill to be pulled. Imagine this, we go back a few years and let's say the skill Agility is proposed. There's no way it would ever pass the polls. It's a skill the large majority hate to train, but offers decent benefits. Players would argue, why can't we just make all the shortcuts diary requirements, or have each one need different skill requirements, like strength to push a boulder? Sure, more run energy would be nice, but players who hate grinding would dislike the advantage it gives to players who do. Whether any of these are even valid arguments, I can guarantee they'd all happen should agility be pulled, because everyone is different. It's literally to the point where people who didn't like sailing and voted no to it are now requesting it to be re-pulled ever since warding was announced. This is because opinions change over time as the community does. So in conclusion, will old school RuneScape ever get a new skill? My opinion is no. The only way it happens is if some serious changes occur, like only 60% yes votes are needed for a skill to pass. I'm not saying this is what should or will happen, I'm just saying it's one of the only ways enough of the community will be okay with a new skill. One way we could maybe get a new skill without changing how voting works is introducing a demo of the skill. Have a few beta worlds where the player can train this skill for up to level 10 or 20. This should give players an idea of how it works. Also make it a requirement that if you want to vote on the poll, to at least train the skill for a few minutes or maybe get it to level 10. Regardless of all this, who knows? I could be wrong and warding will pass, but the way I see it, it's not likely. I don't have much else to say, so let me know all your opinions on this subject down below.